we've recorded all of these roundtable meetings and make them available on a YouTube channel for anyone to review. So not just for IMS members who are the ones who, as a benefit, can participate in these meetings live, but the recordings we do make available to the general public as well. So today's meeting, we're going to learn a little bit more about a new specification. Some of you may have heard about it. It's something we've talked about for a couple of years in the LTI project group about automatic registration, tool registration. We have a new spec that we're preparing to release as a member candidate final called the dynamic registration. And so Claude, who's been one of the champions, chief editors of that specification document, is going to provide an introduction and then a demo of how that works between Moodle and Cengage. And then we'll also have another demonstration of an LTI tool from Open Assessment Technologies. So as we're going through the presentations and demonstrations today, if you have questions, feel free to use the chat, and some communication discussion can take place, in synchronized with the presentations if you'd like. And any questions we can't get to in the chat, we should have some time at the end to open up for Q&A. So with that, let's go ahead. Claude, over to you.
Hello. So yes, so let's start it with dynamic registration. Okay. So dynamic registration. You may have seen that with LTI Advantage, while it's bringing a lot of things to the table, it makes the registration of a tool much more complicated than it used to be, where you could just send a key and a secret and a URL and you were done. There is much more of a copy pasting and exchange of information on both sides that needs to be set up in order to get your tool to work. So that's basically what this spec is about, to try to make things much easier to deploy a new LTI Advantage tool into a platform. So actually, I'm going to start with a demo showing how that works, and then we're going to go to the details about what's happening on for this to actually for the magic to happen. So I'm going to go to actually a Moodle. Whoop. So sorry, back here. So I'm going to go to the site administration and in the manage tools section, and that's Moodle 3.10, just fresh off the press. Just released, and it has this new button called Add LTI Advantage, and it's basically based on the specifications kind of worked in parallel, and so that basically can be seen as a the first implementation or proof of concept of the specification. So, but that is a Moodle LTI Advantage deployment in 3.10. So the way we made it work in Cengage is that now we're going to send an email. And this email is still going to contain a bunch of data that you had to copy paste on Moodle. And then there was a link on our side where you had to copy paste stuff you get from Moodle on our side. But so we keep having the manual registration in place. But we're going to allow the user instead, if they still have the latest version of Moodle, to just copy paste. And I have to copy. That's a little trick here because there is no JavaScript magic. Right. Just copy paste this URL here. And go to Moodle, and if all goes well, and paste this here, add LTI Advantage. And here we are. So we're going to ask the user. So what you've seen, this URL is so long because this URL actually contains a one-time usage token about that specific requirement. And this email is sent just to the record administrators that we have for this institution. So the admin gets this email. This email contains a one-time use-only registration that's going to expire if it's not used rapidly. And so therefore here we know exactly who we're talking through the context in this URL. So now we know, okay, do we want to confirm this registration to this site? And you say you register. And yeah, you successfully registered. Complete. That's it. Now you have the Cengage tool totally deployed, ready to use, all configured. And the same configuration has been done on our side. And now as a tool, you just have to look and verify the services and privacies like what you agree for that tool. And when you're done, you can just activate the tool, and the tool is ready to use. So you see the one-click deployment of an LTI Advantage in action. And that's what this spec is really about. So we're going to look a little bit more at the details of what's actually happening in that spec. So I've got my presentation somewhere here. So that specification is actually based. So if you've noticed in LTI Advantage, there is a pattern where we try to use existing specification and profile them with LTI. So obviously LTI Advantage is based on OpenID, and therefore the registration is going to be based on OpenID Connect Discovery, which is the ability for a tool to know about the platform, and the dynamic client registration for the ability for the tool to actually register with the platform. So that we leverage and profile those two specifications for LTI. So we're going to look a bit at the details of what's happening here. So there is an email that's put into the platform, and from there the platform is going to ever open a new tab or new frame, and is going to include into this registration URL two additional parameters: the OpenID configuration endpoint and a registration token. And actually, we can see that back in Moodle. Now, if I can go back to Moodle here, up here, if I go to Moodle, and now I use another tool, which is more a test tool. So we see, and when we do this test tool, we're going to see everything that's happening here. So this was sent to this registration URL, again, with two parameters. Sorry, so here, the configuration endpoint and the registration token. And now from that, and now the tool can go and ask the OpenID configuration back to the platform. So that's going to give us all the information about the platform to the tool. So that's basically the first thing it got here. This is what Moodle returned for the configuration endpoint. And so you're going to find your key elements that you need to register a platform: the token endpoint, the JWKS URIs, the authorization endpoint, or basically all of those. You're going to also find the scope supported, basically telling you what the platform supports in terms of services. And you're going to find the claim, same thing, what kind of information the platform is ready to share with you about the user. And also there is that's basically plain OpenID discovery specification. And there is an extension, an additional property here, which is the LTI platform configuration, which is going to contain the things that are really now purely LTI in addition to the OpenID. So it's going to be like the platform information, like it's Moodle, which version, with the kind of message types that's supported by this platform, and the substitution variable. So that's basically the information about the platform you get from the tool. And so now that you got that, there is an important piece of data here that I forgot to mention, is that in here you have the registration endpoint, which is going to be the endpoint where now you're going to be able to send your registration request to the platform. So now once you get that, and what we see here, so a tool may actually use this time now to prompt the user to log in, to do some additional UI that's related to registration on the tool side. That's not really part of the specification, but at the end of that flow, you're ready as a tool to post a registration request, like a client registration request. So you go back in here, and that's basically the next stage here. So first you verify that we have the key elements were found, and then now that is a registration request that's going to be sent to this endpoint to register that tool. And again, here you're going to find the OpenID element to it here, like the JWKS for the tool, and but then you can also find the LTI tool configuration, and in particular the message types. And we see here this tool declares that it supports deep linking, and it has a specific endpoint for well, actually it's the same endpoint for everyone, but it specifies an endpoint here, but it specifies a deep linking request. And also that's the kind of claims it's looking for. So you would like to get the name, but not the email of that user. And so, and the scope here is the services this tool would like to get also, like you would like to access here, in particular the assignment and grade service in the platform. So that's the registration request. It's going to be sent to the tool. And the key element here is that it's sent to the tool with the registration token you got in the initial leg here. So this registration token will allow you to post your registration to the tool. And if all goes successfully, then the registration is going to be echoed back to you and reach with a client ID about that registration. So that's basically that's the response here. We saw here that we got a client ID. So now we've been registered, and the platform has given us the client ID for that registration. And some platform may also include the deployment ID if really the registration and the client and the deployment are one-to-one. So you will get it. In that case, that's the case in Moodle. So you also get the deployment ID. And finally, here you're done. So now you can show that the registration has been a success, which is kind of here. It's been a success. And then now you need to close that, and there is a little Windows post message that you send back to the platform. This was to avoid an open redirect. So just here, the tool is going to tell it's done to the platform by just sending a post message back to the upper frame saying, I'm done. So I'm going to click I'm done here. And now you see this sends the signals to Moodle to refresh its list of tools. And now you see these tools has been deployed. And again, like the Cengage tools is ready to be activated. And again, the very important step here is for the administrator to review, and it's okay. So what's important to understand that at this stage, there is no difference if the tool was deployed manually or automatically. It's so the admin can just go there and modify any permission he wants at any time. So that's the flow, and that's dynamic registration in there. And the key thing here is that it's an automated registration and it's not a contract negotiation. So basically you get information about the platform, you ask what you want, and the platform tells you, here is this tool, you got those scopes and those claims, but those can change at any time. So as a tool, you should always expect up for most of the data you want, but always have a good, nice degradation if you don't get the data that you once expected. So if, for example, if you don't have a username, then you should have a proper way to degrade. So that's dynamic registration. And I don't know if there were any questions because I was not monitoring the chat. Yep. All good?
Any questions about this specifically? Okay, looks like some in the chat.
Stop sharing.
Moodle's the first one because Claude and his team, Cengage, sponsored that getting into Moodle. As far as it coming into all the other LMSs, they were all part of this process, and everyone's super excited about the spec because of how much easier it makes everything. So we have no commitments or timelines from any of the LMSs right now, only excitement and desire to to implement it. We're hoping it will start to take off quickly. But it's still pretty early on the spec, so we don't know the answer to that, David Lippman. But we're hoping through the beginning of next year that most will start putting this on their plans to implement. So we're kind of stuck on whatever their development cycles are.
And yes, and so in the context of Moodle, it was rather easy to implement because everything fits on one page, 1.1 or 1.3. So and then it's also a single tenant model, and that's why this spec here might be a little bit more work on some of our platforms. But yeah.
And then the follow-up question is, when do you all get to see the spec? We're working on doing the technical work of getting the spec ready for publishing. It will be published as a member final draft, so that means everyone who's here will be able to see it. And so that's why we're sharing this now. We're trying to prime the pump and get everyone excited and ready to start implementing it. So in the next few weeks, it should be out. Is that right, Mark Mikkel?
Yeah, I was hoping to have it published by now, but I know Colin had some feedback, and that's in relation to how this fits with the security framework spec. So he asked for his feedback to be shared with the group before we made it available. So that's part of the delay as well. But that should happen hopefully in the next day or two.
Yeah. And so that's a simple thing, right? You paste in URL, you get your LTI Advantage deployed, but that really could make the ability to do local deployment or more deployment of LTI Advantage much more approachable, because it makes this process much easier. Right?
Yeah, and let's put a little context around this. We've brought this up a few times, but after the spec that shall not be named, LTI something else, where we tried to solve all the problems, and that kind of made LTI 2 fail in a way just because there's so much. For LTI 1.3 and Advantage, we purposely, broke down how many problems we were going to solve, and we pushed off the registration. So this is us getting back to some of those problems. To provide more context around all of the registration stuff. So we're hoping that, we'll slowly whittle away at the other problems that need to be solved. And this is an example of just the community moving along with LTI 1.3.
Yeah, and to go to the simple approach, I mean, here, we didn't try to go to contract negotiation where you tell me what you have, I tell me what you want, we contract, we give. It's all based on it's more informational. So this is the kind of thing I can give you. This is what I want, but this is what you get for now. But there's no such thing as a contract. I think it's very important compared to the specs that should not be named. That was really trying to negotiate a contract, and you could see the difference in Moodle, because if you do an LTI 2 deployment, you cannot modify it. It's read-only mostly. Whereas than if you do an LTI dynamic registration deployment, you can go back in there, and again, it's as if the tool was manually registered. All the fields are there ready for the LMS admin to modify at any time. It's not a contract. All right.
Yeah, so if you're looking at the main LTI webpage, you can see a list of other documents that are in the same member candidate final phase. We've discussed some of them previously here on past roundtable discussions that would include the groups or the caliper endpoint. This dynamic registration spec will be listed there as well as soon as we have it published. And we don't anticipate any major changes to the document, but I know Colin was interested in sharing some feedback. So as soon as we have that and any chance to review it as a project group, we'll make that specification document available. So sorry for the delay, but thank you, Claude, and for those who have done the work to prepare this and the early work in adopting it. We will see, a move to this, as Bracken said, more people adopting it over time. So look forward to all of your feedback too once you have a chance to review the document as a member candidate final. All right, let's our next agenda item is to hear a little bit more about a tool that our friends at Open Assessment Technologies have developed. So Jonathan, if you want to talk about your tool and provide a demo, that would be great.
Okay. Hello everyone, can you hear me correctly?
Yeah, coming in loud.
Yeah, okay. So first of all, I wanted to apologize for my accent. So if you don't understand, don't hesitate to make me repeat. I won't be, there is no problem with that.
No problem, by the way.
No problem, by the way, this French flavored, yeah. And the second point before I wanted to start is thank you for all the people that keep answering our question on the LTI Slack channel. It is very helpful, so it's really appreciated. I will try to share my screen right now. Tell me if you can see it. Okay, yeah. All good. So I wanted to give, before the actual tool presentation, a quick overview of the PHP libraries that OAT is working with, actually. So you will find in green the repositories that we open sourced, meaning they are available for everyone. This is on that license, GPL2. And you can have more information about the status, the test coverage, the number of downloads, or whatsoever. And the two important columns are platform and tool. If there is a yes, it means we support the tool side and or the platform side, right? So since, as I understood, LTI specification are layered, there is the core as a foundation, and then on top you have NRPS, AGS, deep linking, and whatsoever that rely on the core as foundation. We provided the same kind of layering. So we have an LTI core library that is framework agnostic, meaning this is pure PHP. It's not related to any popular framework such as Symfony, Laravel, or whatsoever. This is pure PHP to make it the more easy to integrate in any PHP application. I will jump in the quick README presentation of that library. So you will find a recap of the concepts that are explained in the IMS specification. You can find a tutorial section. Basically, this is just links to other README present in that repository. You will find quick instruction how to configure it. So how you configure your keys, how you declare a platform, a tool, and a registration to bind the two of them, basically. You can use public key exchange, or you can also use JWKS if you want to. We support both. And then if you want to jump into more details, you can customize the library. And there is some interfaces, so PHP contracts you can implement, override to fit your needs. For example, if you need to find your registration information from a web service or from a database or whatsoever, you just have to implement that tiny class. And there is, again, in the README documentation, every kind of interfaces are available for customization and with the documentation. The most important part of the core is to handle as a tool and or a platform, because when you install that library, you can act as both. When you just need to trim out what you don't want to use, actually. You just ignore the part that you don't want to use. With that library, you can handle platform originating LTI messages. So intermediated by the user agent. Sorry, there is a tiny stuff here. And basically, I recap here the diagram from the specification itself with the steps. So basically, what do you need to do as a platform to initiate an OpenID Connect flow? What do you need to do as a tool to respond to it, and whatsoever with the authentication, and to finally display the resource? So this is organized this way. By example, if I want to jump in the OpenID authentication part, I click here and I see what I need to implement. So I need to provide an authenticator that will respond to the login hints, and then I can simply redirect. So basically, when you use that library, what you need to do and to expose that endpoints, it's a few lines of code, because we try to put the maximum of automation on the library level. So that was for the platform originating messages. We have the same for the tool originating messages. By example, for a deep linking response. Again, you will find the IMS diagram with the steps and the code snippets that help you to build a valid and real example. On top of the core, as I was explaining before, we added supplementary libraries. So they are built on top of the core, meaning when you install, by example, the NRPS library, it will, as a dependency, also install the core that is used behind the hood, if I may say. So NRPS library for the moment is made public. It has been released and it's handled the tool and the platform side. Before going to NRPS, I forgot something. So the core library allow you to handle messages interaction, but also services interaction. Services interaction when the platform and the tool are communicating directly without involving the user browser. You have the instruction and the component to act server side. So to offer a mechanism to issue access tokens that are scoped. So you find everything you need here. And you have also a validator you can plug into your application to actually respond to the requests that are protected by access token, basically. It's quite simple to use. You create the validator, you validate the request, and you move forward, basically. And the same for the client side. Since there is a kind of particular usage of 002 in IMS LTI specification, I'm talking about the client credentials with the client assertion. We provide a client, basically, that you just need to give in which registration context you are about to make a call. So from the registration, it will be able to return to retrieve the information about the tool and the platform you are talking about. You specify the method, the URL, and the parameter, and that's it. That stuff is actually in charge to fetch for you an access token and to cache it in a cache you can provide at the client construction. So you can put the token into Redis or whatsoever, up to you to provide a valid PSR cache implementation. So this is very low-level layers of LTI. This is not really business-oriented, if I may say. By business, I mean there is no advantage feature on that. So if I go back to the other repositories, I will take an example of NRPS. Same kind of README, same kind of documentation. You will find the instruction how to use the library as a tool. So basically, if you want to retrieve a membership, you will have to use that client that actually extends the core client. So using that client, it will inherit of the benefits to handle for you the token, by example, and you just do this call. For registration, I want to get on that URL the memberships filtered by role learner, and I want 10 of them. This is working this way. It will return OOP object, so basically a PHP object in which you can have all the accessors that you need to iterate on the members of the membership, retrieve the identifier and all the other information. And it also offers the platform side. So basically there is a tiny implementation to provide how to respond to the NRPS request. So when you are requested a context membership or a resource link membership, you just need to fill in the blank, if I may say so. I won't go into the detail for the next libraries, but I will present you that they exist. We have also opened the deep linking library. We support both platform and tool side. We are currently working on the AGS library. So for the moment, it mainly supports the tool side, and we are working on the same kind of automation that was done on NRPS to ease the implementation on the platform. So to offer all the endpoints for the line items, the scores, the result, and whatsoever. And the same for the basic outcome. For the moment, we support the tool side, and the platform side is in progress. So as you see, and in the README, by example, there is a bunch of code that you need to do. But if you are lucky, and if you use Symfony, like us, it's a kind of popular framework that is making web applications development pretty easy. We also created a Symfony bundle, which is also documented in the same way. That basically, when you install it, it will install for you the core and pre-configure everything and makes your application ready to be used as an LTI tool and or a platform. It will expose for you the JWKS endpoints, depending on your configuration. It will open for you an easy way to generate launches and an easy way to protect your endpoints for messages and services interactions. I can show you quickly how look like the configuration. You will find how you configure your key chains, how you configure your platform, your tools, and how you register them together, basically. So as I said before, you can, if YML format doesn't suit you because you have your registration information in the database, you can go back to the core, say into the Symfony application, okay, I want to override the way I fetch my registration by implementing the interface I mentioned before. But by default, it works with YML this way. So it makes it ready to be used out of the box. To wrap all of that, we created a demo application that is using Symfony, that is running the bundle, which behind the scene runs the core. And on top of that, we added the libraries that are in green for the moment, because those ones are private. And since we want to make the demo application installable and usable by everyone, we only integrated for the moment the green libraries, so meaning NRPS deep linking, right? I will open the repository. So this is in PHP. But this is Dockerized. That means even if you don't do PHP, and if you want an easy way, quick way to pop up an LTI testing tool or testing platform within your development stack, you just need basically to Docker compose it up, and that's it, basically. What it will offer to you, when it is installed and deployed out of the box, it will act as a tool and a platform, but registered with itself, you know, itself acting as a tool, talking to itself, or acting as a platform. You have also, if you want to see it live, and this is the second point of my presentation, we hosted on the Google Cloud Platform, so you can see it running. It looks like that, basically. You can see here that the demo platform is myself. This is that application. I define here my name, the audience, the authentication URL, and the access token URL. I have also that application acting itself as a tool. So this is a demo tool, OpenID initiation URL, the launch URL, deep linking URL. And I have a registration linking itself as a platform and itself as a tool with some deployment IDs, the client ID, and the keychains and or JWKs. Just a note, if you provide both of them, it will always try to use the key first to avoid HTTP calls for JWKs. But you can provide one of them, but if you provide none of them, of course, it won't work. So you can use depending on your need, the direct key chain with a key change or directly the JWTs URL. Okay, so that platform, that application, so acts, as I said, as a tool and a platform. So from the platform side, you can launch the tool. So I will launch the tool on the demo registration, so on itself, with a user like Yoda. I will add some claims. I can easily normally format it if I don't make a typo. Oh, sorry. Okay, and I can add a bunch of predefined, well-known LTI claims, such as, by example, the NRPS. So it will happen for me already to use the correct membership NRPS URL from that application acting as a platform. I can generate the launch. It offers me a recap, so it will be for that. With that login hints, the URL will be here. This is the first target of the OpenID Connect flow. The final targeting URL will be the launch URL of the tool for that client ID and that deployment ID. And we use also the JWT to provide our LTI messaging. If you want to see the content, you click on that, and it redirects you to gbt.io, and you can see the clear content. Okay, so now I will launch it. And now I'm running the same application, but launched with LTI. So I have access to all the LTI information as a tool after the launch. So we know this is LTI version 1.3. It was a message type LTI resource link request. It recapped for me all the checks that were done to validate the correct LTI launch. You can find security in the security tab, the ID token, so the actual message payload of LTI. The same, you have the shortcut to gbt.io to see all the claims here. The same for the state. As a tool, the library, if you use it, will generate a JWT for the state. It permits us to carry some information that are signed. So this is kind of pretty handy for us. You can retrieve which context, which registration the launch was done into. So it was using that registration that links the demo platform to the demo tool. You have a recap of all the configuration. In the user tab, you can find the Yoda with all the claims that were given. I didn't choose the role as the launch. And here you have a recap of all the claims. So basically the content of the ID token, but with a tiny feature which allow you to browse a bit basically. So if I search for value, NRPS, I find again my NRPS claim here. Since the tool detected that the platform made as a capability available NRPS, it also offers you to query the NRPS service of that platform. So you can code it this way, you can retrieve the user information. So this is a dummy example NRPS implementation, but this is following the specification, meaning you can filter on the role by example, and you can limit it, and you can use the relation link to be able to use the pagination, basically. This is for the demo application acting as a tool, launching itself. Now you can have also the tool calling a platform service. I will just grab that URL quickly. As I said, we have on the core library a service client that is able to call any kind of LTI service, AGS, NRPS, whatsoever. So we have a form that is generic, non-bounded to any of them. But by example, if I call my NRPS URL with the scope, the correct scope, which is this one, if I'm right, for NRPS, yes, on the demo registration, I will receive all my NRPS payload that is offered by that application as a platform. So since that application launches itself, it's not really interesting to see. So I also activated a registration with Moodle. So here I declared in my YML file that I showed before a Moodle platform with the correct access token URL and OpenID Connect authentication URL. And I created a registration with the client ID that Moodle gave me from the Moodle platform to the demo tool with that deployment ID. And here, as you can see, I don't use the public key of Moodle. I use directly their JWTs, which is here. So what I will try to do right now is to go to Moodle. I hope it's still okay. Yeah, it should be good. And on Moodle, just to show you quickly, I activated already in this, the LTI Showcase application. So basically you will find already all the settings that Claude showed, but unfortunately it was not dynamic, I did it manually. So you can find the usual settings where I can find my GWKS, initiate login URL, and I also activated deep linking. And I also enable AGS and NRPS in the capabilities of the platform. So what I try to do right now, I will just delete that. Okay. I will use deep linking to get a launch link from my tool. So here you can see the same kind of interface that is offered by the tool, but in deep linking mode. You can see this is a deep linking request with all the usual checks, and you can see the security context, registration, and the claims that we received. And I know that Moodle says that it wants only resource links, and that's it. So basically with those document targets and everything. So the tool offers that resource link to be returned to the platform. And if I show more, you can see that I retrieve also the launch URL, the container, the icon URL, and the description. So if I use it, you can see I retrieve the icon, the description, the title, and everything. And then if I launch it, again, we go back to that application acting as a tool, working in the registration with Moodle, offering my user details, so my Moodle account, basically, with the same claims. I can browse with the same tool, and I can use their NRPS service, basically, in the same way. So that's it for the presentation. The next steps when LGS library, here, will be green, so released. We will also add the LGS capabilities as a tool and a platform to the demo application, and the same for incoming specs, basically. That's it for me, if you have any questions.
Very, very nice. Very nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
I was wondering, in terms of utility here, there is another thing that we've been discussing, and you may have, I mean, this is a cookie issue. And I found that a library, if there was a way for a library to be able to, yes, I want to enforce cookie and have the way to basically pop up and ask for the authorization, I think that would be a nice addition to a library. So to have this ability, yeah, my tool implementation requires cookies. So have this tool, this library knows from a UI perspective how to, to pop up and ask the user access to the storage API, and therefore the cookie could be granted. So, and do the test for cookies. So I know it would be really, I think it would be really useful, because it's a bit of a delicate matter, but if the library could offer that, that would also be very nice.
Okay, but we are open. As I said, it is totally open source, so open for any contribution. And by example, on the bundle level, sorry, so not on the library level, but on the bundle level, we also handle like the launch presentation redirection, by example. If you have any LTI error message to redirect to the platform, this is handled on that level. So we could add also this kind of cookie feature on that library. For the moment, we don't use it yet because we mainly exchange GVT token. We don't work yet with cookie managed tools, but it's totally open for any kind of contribution.
Nice. Looks great. A question about where else you're currently using it. Is this currently being used for OAT's like production tools that they're building, or is it at the moment purely just a project to try and get an LTI library working?
So the libraries and the bundle I use in production with our customers. We also shared with them the demo application, in the tiny Docker stack, so they can work on their side without having our instances running for the testing their LTI interaction. As they act as a platform, so they use the demo application as a tool. So it's already running in a production context, yes, with our customers, and the demo application is already shared. And I had a nice surprise last week to have a contribution from PHP popular guy, and he told me that it is also used to run a project in the University of Georgia, as far as I know.
Oh, okay, that's very cool. I know from, I think the main issue I had with when I started doing a PHP library was I did it as a pet project and I didn't have a production use for it. So, you know, it's over time it's kind of fallen behind a bit. So I think it's nice to have something like this that's going to be a little bit more up to date if people are using it for production things, and yeah, hopefully we'll be able to get a little bit more weight behind it and some good contribution towards it.
As I said, for the moment, as I know, only that guy in Georgia use it in production and us, but I would be really happy to see more people jumping in and bringing more contribution to that library, yes. If you find it interesting. That's it for me, if you have no more questions.
Doesn't look like very many questions in the chat, just a lot of accolades. So nice job.
Thank you very much.
Looks like a question about where you can access the repository. So maybe
I'll answer that. It segues right into what I was going to do anyway.
Okay.
So everyone, if you remember that we have this great resource, we call it the LTI Bootcamp, and we have lots of links from community members in here. And so I'm sure Jonathan can share the links directly in the chat here, but we have, this has been added to this repository, and I'll put this link in the chat here. So this is definitely a resource you should all bookmark, and it has what Jonathan just presented and many other community resources. And this continues to grow. So it's great to see how much the LTI community is coming up to help each other with all these libraries. So this is an excellent way to get to those, whoever asked that. Mark, should I transition into the questions?
Yeah, that would be great. So we have just a few minutes left, 10 minutes or so, and we do have a Google form where we allow people to submit questions in advance of the meeting, and we've received a few since our last roundtable in October, at the end of October. So, but we can also take any questions just in general. This is open for you if you have questions related to what you saw today or just your own LTI work. Feel free to raise your hand or type a question in the chat. And in the meantime, we'll review some of those questions we've received through the Google form.
All right. So we just have 3 of them. I'll read this and let everyone hear. The LTI domain model shown in the spec indicates that users identified by the sub are scoped to the platform or the issuer, but I've seen examples where they're scoped to tool, issuer, and client ID. Which way is correct? Is it possible that a compliant platform will identify the same user with a different sub depending on client ID?
In theory, they can be scoped to the client ID. I'd have to double check in the spec exactly what we scope it to, but I would have. I don't know, it's a tough one. I would have said issuer off the top of my head, but potentially client, if somebody is doing it by client ID, I don't know if that is necessarily a forbidden thing to do in the spec. So I'd have to double check on that.
I thought it had to be scoped to issuer when we talked about this ever so long ago, but that was a very long time ago.
Yeah, that was the spirit. Yeah, we said the sub goes to the issuer per open ID, you know, it's like
yeah.
So sub is issuer, but
it's a hard problem to solve if you don't have a central service for allocating sub IDs, though, isn't it?
Well, if you use GUID, that's all right.
No, I know, but well, okay, so it's not a hard problem to solve. It's assuming that, yeah. So I mean, that's what we do, and it works, and so
yeah. So I think I was more thinking like, would there be a platform that would like to say, oh, well, I don't want my user IDs to be the same on purpose between different client ID, you know, just to mess things up a little bit. But yeah, I think the idea was to associate that to the issuer. The issuer has users, and it has tools. Tools have client ID, but the users are not users of, they exist outside of the tools. Therefore, they should be identified outside of the tool. Yeah.
Should I go to the next one? All right. So, is there any feature or recommendation within the latest LTI spec addressing a UX related requirement for limiting handling the delay experienced before a tool UI loads following an LTI launch? Can such a timeout be specified or encoded in some launch parameters? Or is this perhaps something the LTI project group may have considered or concluded is outside the technical scope of the spec and could rather be defined and managed by contextual bespoke rules within platforms and tools?
This isn't something that we specify. It's not really something that we can specify, especially not as part of the spec, because it's more of a, as it says here, like a UX UI flow. And potentially it would be something that we could try and address in a best practice, but it wouldn't be
I feel like
wouldn't be part of the spec.
That would be a good best practice. Say, hey, if there's going to be a page and it's, you know, loaded, you know, users are in this state of mind and you should be providing this information, or just say a loading page. I mean, there probably could be some best practices established around this, but there is not currently. All right. Any other comments on this one? Thanks, Martin. Okay. In order to be able to copy the version of LTI resources that existed when a course was exported, an LTI tool needs to be notified when a course export happens. In addition, during import or the first time the tool was launched, it needs to know which instance of the course that the course was copied from. It could be as simple as adding a service that would let you register a callback that could be notified when the course is exported. If the callback could return an ID, and then during import, the ID could be sent back to the LTI tool, that might meet the need. Is there any current or plans to add support for this?
So I think it goes back a bit to common cartridge. And so, and also deep linking.
Copy and common cartridge.
Well, because you see, as I said, exported, right? Yeah, so it goes to course copy, but also to, because course copy, you have the context ID histories, you know, but it's really here. Yeah, when I read export, I read more like a, you know, an archive of some kind. And you restore that archive, and it could have the custom parameters, it would have the launch URL, but right now, from a common cartridge standpoint, it's limited in other context. So I think we could look at, is there a way to make the idea of context ID history relate to cartridges? You know, it's like knowing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a best practice we could definitely establish there if that were useful. You know, just using the extensions area within any given link and just have a commonly defined history there, as long as, you know, that information isn't seen as secure, or, you know,
Yeah.
it's exposing context IDs from one system potentially to another, problematic in some way, things like that, which I'm not sure. I haven't thought through that, but
yeah, we would have to.
There's room in common cartridge to add things like this. We have not. No one has specified that yet.
Yeah, and we've not talked about a serialization API, you know, that would go to a tool and says, I'm about to serialize yourself, give me a representation of you so that I can put it into my archive. You know, we never talked about a service like that, which could be useful, you know, it's like as an API tool, you're going to be serialized, give me a snippet of JSON or whatever that I need to put in the cartridge so that you'll find your stuff when you come back to life, you know, but we've never looked at that really.
I think the best practice is to not rely on the platform's resource link ID.
Yeah, definitely that would be the very first one. Put custom parameters, put URL, but don't use resource link ID customization.
And there was a recent one of these meeting roundtables that kind of discussed some of that as well. So that'll be a good intro to that concept. Any other comments on this one? So those are the three we had submitted. We probably have time for another question or two if someone wants to unmute and ask it, or ask it in the chat.
Any questions from anyone? It's your chance to stump an LTI expert. Good question, Dan, about the deprecation notice. So essentially it means that since the IMS certifications are good for a year, so they expire after 365 days, we will no longer be issuing LTI 1.1 certifications after January 31st of this year. So effectively deprecating the certification of systems. People will still continue to use earlier versions of LTI, of course, but where this is an effort to get the market to move to the latest version, LTI 1.3, and Advantage for all of the security and just the interoperability benefits, as well as some of the new stuff you saw today with dynamic registration. So what you should worry about is more just migrating to that. We've been focused on the last couple of presentations at the quarterly and the roundtable. Last month's roundtable was on that issue of migration, and we'll address that again, I think, at January's session. So maybe from the perspective of platforms, we could hear what some things to worry about for that deprecation schedule.
I think one of the things that I'm most concerned about is that the IMS certification suite for 1.1 provides one really valuable result, and that is that it helps to detect and prevent regressions in implementations. Without the cert suite, we'll have no commonly accepted ruler for detecting interoperability regressions, right? Platforms simply won't be able to depend on an IMS provided suite to demonstrate their interoperability. They'll have to rely on their own internal test suites or reference implementations to be able to detect regressions and provide that assurance to customers. I'm also a little bit concerned about RFP language that requires LTI and needs demonstration of LTI 1.1 compatibility, because nobody will be able to demonstrate compatibility effectively anymore. So this really is a push for everybody to migrate to 1.3, and vendors should really take that seriously and on board. For the wider audience, in case you don't know who I am, I'm Victor from D2L. Sorry, I didn't identify myself.
No, thanks, Victor. And good question, Dan.
Yeah, from Blackboard's perspective, we have no interest in changing support for LTI 1.1. We'll support that as long as we need to. Of course, we want everybody on 1.3 because that's where all the goodness is. But we aren't going to remove our support for 1.1.
Yeah, we won't either. I didn't mean to suggest we would. We just
won't. No, and I didn't mean to suggest.
We just won't have an official way of claiming that we support it. That's all.
Okay, well, that was a timely reminder, given we will not have a roundtable meeting in December, because it will be right at the end of the year holidays. So with that, we wish you, those who will not be the regular contributing member participants on the LTI project group meetings, which will continue for the next few Tuesdays as we approach the end of December. Our next roundtable will be I think the 24th of January. I'm sorry, the 22nd of January. No, that's December, would be the 26th of January. So we will skip our December roundtable meeting, but wish you all a very happy end to an interesting 2020, and look forward to more opportunities to further the work of LTI, and appreciate your attendance today. And for those who presented, feel free to reach out online through the Google form if questions come up, for example, or the various forums or other channels where you can reach out if you do need support in your LTI implementation efforts. So thank you, everyone. happy Thanksgiving for those in the US celebrating this week. And we'll talk to the LTI project group members next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.